Willful version, Essays in Feminism by Marilyn Frye. Part 2, 4 reviews. Essay number 6, The Contest of Feminisms. A review of Feminist Politics and Human Nature by Alison Jagger. This is an ambitious and very interesting book. Jagger undertakes to identify, compare, and criticize the major schools of contemporary feminist thought, and to show which is the best of the lot and why. As scholarship, it covers an enormous amount of ground. As politics, it is bold. In its central and most contentious argument, it is challenging. The book begins with the claim that all political philosophies presuppose theories of human nature, and any complete and distinctive political philosophy is grounded in a coherent and distinctive theory of human nature. By a quote-unquote theory of human nature, she means interdependent conceptions of what it is to be a human being and what constitutes such a being's well-being. She argues that feminism is political philosophy, and thus it is possible and illuminating to distinguish feminism from non-feminism and to identify and compare the various feminisms in terms of underlying theories of human nature. And this she undertakes to do, comparing and contrasting Marxist, liberal, radical, and socialist feminisms, discussing each in a chapter on its theory of human nature and a chapter on its politics. The first sign that the project is not as neatly conceived as it may sound is in Jagger's justifications of her selection of certain feminisms and not others for inclusion in it. She claims to identify political theories, feminisms, by reference to their distinctive theories of human nature, and she justifies treating neither Black feminism nor anarchist feminism as discrete feminist theories, by saying in each case that it is not identifiable in terms of a single distinctive conception of human nature. But she goes on to identify radical feminism as a discrete political theory in spite of her claim that it does not have a single conception of human nature, and she excludes from the project both existentialist and quote-unquote religious feminisms, even though they are, among feminisms, probably the most conscientiously grounded in the most articulate theories of human nature. The groundedness of political theories in theories of human nature does not, after all, play quite the central organizing role here that Jagger claims for it. As the plot unfolds, it turns out, contra her claims on page 10, that Jagger is not laying out 4 distinct political theories with 4 distinctive theories of human nature, but 3 theories, and something which by her lights is not a political theory, radical feminism, which are variously related to 2 theories of human nature, the Marxist and the liberal. The theories of human nature, which, according to Jagger, underlie all of the 4 feminisms, are presented as more or less closely approximating or deviating from these 2. As Jagger sees it, the liberal sort of view of human nature is wrong because it is static, ahistorical, and essentialist. Being human consists in being rational, which is a timeless and unchanging property inherent to whatever individuals have it. The Marxist sort of view is right because it is dynamic, historical, materialist, and dialectical. Being human is being an animal whose ever-changing nature is determined dialectically in praxis. Jagger's analyses suggests that all the feminisms tend to evolve toward a Marxist sort of view of human structure simply because the more one understands the structures of sexism and oppression of women, the more obvious it becomes that they cannot be criticized or resisted in any way that would bring a fundamental change, women's liberation, so long as one accepts the static and androcentric concept of woman, man, and human that they presuppose. Even Marxist feminism, developing toward Jagger's socialist feminism, has to become, in a sense, more Marxist by making the categories of woman and man as no more quote-unquote given or quote-unquote natural than the category human. The chapters on radical feminism and socialist feminism are the heart of the book. Jagger fully recognizes the creative and profound contributions of radical feminism to our understanding of the oppression of women, but she rejects radical feminism and argues the superiority of socialist feminism. After I emerged from grappling with the details of the argument, my post-struggle feeling was that there is really not much difference between the two. It seems that most feminists in both groups would generally agree in respect to the following fundamental propositions or attitudes. Point 1. The oppression of women is not an epiphenomenon of any other dominant subordinate system such as capitalism or racism. Point 2. Sex, sexuality, and reproduction are quote-unquote political, and the traditional private/public distinction is untenable. Point 3. Women are a political class which cuts across boundaries of economic class, race, and nationality. Point 4. Compulsory heterosexuality and motherhood for women is a central phenomenon of the subordination of women to men. Point 5. The processes of political action and change are as important as their products. Point 6. Capitalism is inconsistent with the liberation of women. And this is by no means a complete list of what might be quote-unquote points of unity for both radical and socialist feminists. What Jagger accepts of radical feminism, and she accepts it pretty warmly and with few reservations, is its description of the world as perceived in the experience of women, the feminist description of male-dominated social order. She, of course, notes its incompleteness due to lack of expression of the experience of women of all races, classes, and so on. What she faults radical feminism for is what she sees as its failure to construct a political theory grounded in an adequate concept of human nature, and its consequent failure, as she sees it, to provide the necessary foundation for a political movement which can succeed. She argues that socialist feminism can provide such a foundation. For political action to succeed, according to Jagger, it must be determined by a strategy which is suggested by an account of the causes of the social conditions which one wants to change. A description of the social phenomenon in question is not a casual explanation of it, and is therefore not sufficient to generate effective strategies for change. An adequate political theory does provide the needed casual explanation. Jagger says that radical feminists have generated radically new, compelling, and vivid descriptions of men and their behavior and the female subordination institutions of patriarchal cultures, at least Euro-American cultures, but have not provided answers to why men are like that, why they behave like that, why the institutions are what they are, and thus no coherent strategy for change is generated. She thinks that one reason radical feminists have failed in this way is that they tend to take an ahistorical view of society and human beings due to having one of their own historical feet in liberal civil rights politics and philosophy. One does not give casual explanations of things perceived as having no history. On page 289, Jagger says radical feminism, quote, does not explain the material reasons for men's subjugation of women, end quote. My own marginal note there says, quote, men do it to gain material services and psychological benefits attainable by that means, end quote. This seems to me to be a radical feminist's answer, and to be quote-unquote material enough and quote-unquote casual enough to suggest strategies for change. But Jagger pushes the question back. Why do men go after these benefits this way? Is it because anyone with the opportunity would thus exploit others, humans are evil, or because males are like that, males are evil? She seems to think that radical feminists are stuck with picking one of these two quote-unquote biologistic answers, and socialist feminists are not. It is perfectly true that some of the writers one would likely classify as radical feminists, do give the second of these answers, and only a certain ontological faith, quote unquote, proves they are wrong. But I do not see anything in the general drift of radical feminist thought which compels it. Many of us would say, quote unquote, none of the above, and go on to say any human being whose nature was the nature of a man, as constructed in male dominated societies, would be like that given the opportunity, and would also, as a matter of quote unquote business as usual, do the sorts of things which continuously recreate the opportunity. We can locate the cause, but not the ultimate cause, in men's natures, and yet not in men's natures conceived as genetically given. And we might locate some more causes in the natures of women as constructed in male-dominated societies. We could go on, as many of us have, to locate the causes of these natures in both material and ideological structures in such societies, and to try to devise strategies for evolving different structures. With Jager's criticism of radical feminism in mind as I read the chapter on socialist feminists, I was looking for her account of the cause of men's ways of being and behaving, and of women's subordinating institutions existing and being as they are. But no such account is there. She changes the subject, quote unquote, historicizing it, and addresses the question of the causes of the particular form of subordination of women takes at this historical time and place, that is, in contemporary capitalist societies. She then says that it takes the form it takes, quote unquote, alienation. Because of the fetishism of commodities, the rise of positive science, and the separation of home from workplace, the split between emotion and reason, the distinction between the personal and the political, and so on. Page 317. That is, the reason the subjugation of women takes the form it takes is capitalistic societies in the modern era is that they are modern and capitalistic. By analogy, one can distinguish between the question of why humans adorn themselves and why human adornment takes the form it does in Euro-American cultures in the latter part of the 20th century. The latter can be partially answered in terms of the structures of the prevailing form of capitalism, but that leaves the former unanswered. Women are subordinated to men in many, if not all, societies known to Euro-American literati. Explanations of the forms this takes in the different societies are not explanations of this global phenomenon. My guess is that there is no such thing as giving a casual explanation of why humans adorn themselves, and also no such thing as giving a casual explanation of why women are subordinated by men, with local variations of cultural form and detail. I think that Jaeger might agree with me in the view that the only things we can casually explain are the more local perturbations in the river of a human existence. But then radical feminists are not to be faulted for failing to explain, quote unquote, the subordination of women by men. And radical feminists have been as ready to give local casual explanations as Jaeger is. The explanations suggested by radical feminists only give material relations of production less centrality and emphasis, more the mechanisms of the production of culture. I think that socialist feminists and radical feminists not only share many fundamental beliefs, but also, at the theoretical bottom, are up against the same perplexing mysteries. Jaeger's explanation of, quote, the material reasons for men's subjugation of women, end quote, has to do with features of capitalism. But if capitalism determines that some group has to be in charge of compulsive commodity consumption, occupy the quote unquote private realm, be the repository of quote unquote emotion, etc., what determines that that group should be women, females? Why shouldn't it be the males? or the fat or the thin, or the redheads or the females and males of certain non-noble lineages. That such a functional cut is made at all might be explicable in terms of capital. That it is made along the lines of genital sex, and that the females rather than the males are put on the downside is not explained by capital, but by sexism. And a socialist feminist is right back where the rest of the feminists, with the rest of the feminists in explaining that. Why is there sexism? Why are the lines drawn by sex, and why are women on the downside? I do not see how socialist feminism can rescue us from having to wonder if this is finally going to have to be explained in terms of biological reproductive function or not explained at all. And if it comes to that, I would opt for no explanation at all, since I don't think we need one in order to have plausible strategies for change. And this may be the only major point in which I would disagree with Jagger.